Imagine
A podcast.
where time drifts slowly,
A podcast.
where
Isaac
carries you away.
So let me be clear. We tortured some folks.
I've been called a hater before, more than once. People tell me, Isaac, just let people enjoy things. Well, maybe I enjoy disliking things. So we're at an impasse here. I do think it's important to be discerning, to have preferences, to like and dislike things. Because if something doesn't suck, how do you know if something's good? And a lot of shit sucks these days. I'm not a big fan of a lot of stuff that's available in our modern world. A lot of it feels wrong. There's something instinctively upsetting about what we're making today, particularly in urban settings where you have different kinds of cuisines and aesthetics that are popping up that just irk me. And so it's always very vindicating for me when I find someone who manages to articulate the things that are bothering me. And my dear friend Rick over at clout.eater, he is doing just that. I think he's a great modern American consumer critic. There's a reason why you have an instinctive, viscerally, like queasy reaction to something like e-scooters. And Rick explains why you do. And so on today's episode, Rick and I talk about stuff we like and don't like. Be sure to follow Rick over at clout.eater. I'll put the link in bio and stuff. It's a mostly non-political episode, which is kind of a break from... I'm just so tired of the news already. I can't even keep up, So we stay away from that stuff for the most part. So it's a reprieve for now. If you haven't already, I am gently asking once again if you would please subscribe to the Patreon. I can't do this shit for free forever, guys. At some point, if I'm going to keep doing this, I gotta live off of it. This is the right thing to consume, this podcast. So I give my own show my blessing. It's good. So anyway, here's Rick and me talking about consumer culture. And before that, there's a little clip of what Rick's doing, so you'll see for yourself.
The electric rent-a-scooter is the pale horseman of the post-pandemic societal apocalypse. It is the landlord's bucket of eggshell titanium dioxide paint that gets slathered all over the outlets and windows of the world we live in, with no regard for permanence and a deep libido for extraction. The concept of micromobility is, itself, a noble one, but, like a lithium-reliant wolf in environmentally conscious sheep's clothing, lurking beneath the faux urbanist veneer is what I believe to be a far more sinister reality. I spent a few nights in Capitol Hill, regarded by those not embarrassed by the phrase as Denver's bohemian neighborhood. You'll have to forgive me for not having much footage of that period, because I was drunk for a decent amount of it, and because I try to be cognizant of whose face I'm sticking my camera in. Anyway, it's a fun little spot, close to the dive bars on the infamous Colfax Avenue, and walking distance from the Amazon Visa Southwest Northrop Grumman Pride Parade. But the streets are often dirty, the sidewalks are cracked, and where there may have once existed the resources and willpower to fix such things, there is now simply the understanding that there's enough going on in Denver and the nearby mountainous region that people will pay exorbitant rents to live there no matter how high their weeds grow. And hey, if you complain, remember, it's a bohemian neighborhood. Allen Ginsberg used to live here, though he doesn't anymore. What's left is an uncomfortable arrangement now found in many cities, recently deemed desirable by a freshly mobile class of workers with email jobs. You pay above market rate for a nice apartment in a city you like with access to all that nature's plentiful bounty has to offer in a matter of hours. But right here in front of you, there's poverty everywhere. The sort that can't be fixed by a handful of quarters here and there by good-natured residents with the best of intentions. So eventually you're forced to look the other way, trying to remember the humanity of those relegated to the streets, all while feeling uncomfortable with the whole dynamic. Odds are you're also experiencing a certain degree of precarity, and while it's objectively more palatable, you may only be 1 or 2 paychecks away from catastrophe yourself. We live in and are reliant on a culture that fetishizes individual responsibility to an extreme degree, meaning that one half of the political spectrum in this country despises homelessness and addiction, viewing them as personal failings worth being further penalized. And yet, on the opposite end is that same internalized sense of individualism that spurs us to shrug our shoulders and conclude that the best we can do for these people is offer them a weak, closed-mouthed smile as we pass them on the sidewalk, walking just a little bit faster on decaying streets, intent on checking our pockets when we're around the corner and out of view. Enter the Lime Scooter, Silicon Valley's answer to the urban landscape in disarray. The scooter is your excuse to fast pass your way out of waiting in society's lines. You tap your phone, unlock your ride, and coast to your destination without having to share in the suffering taking place inches below you while quite literally floating above it. Though characteristically late to the game, local bureaucracies have now come to the realization there needs to be some sense of order when it comes to the scooters. Nevertheless, there still exists a sense of lawlessness in how they're used. Most users, thinking only of their destination, pick the most express route between point A and point B, be that on the sidewalk, in the middle of the street, or in the bike lane on the wrong side of the road. The faceless startup that dropped the scooters in your community have done so carelessly in the middle of any random sidewalk intended for pedestrians, because they were in the midst of a race to capture market share and couldn't afford to consider people in wheelchairs, lest they'd lose out on competitive city contracts. So naturally, you follow suit and just leave the damn thing anywhere once you're done. Scooters are antisocial. They're the remote workers of the mobility world, hungry for profit at the expense of our already overburdened civic infrastructure, sucking up fares and funneling them back to Palo Alto undertaxed. And yet they proliferate because the alternatives are often much worse. People commented on my last 2 videos on the merits of the RTD and its bus routes, which I'm sure are more than adequate relative to other places in this country. But understand that, though I personally take public transit all the time, there are millions of people who would never even consider it as a possibility, especially when the fact of the matter is that 5 minutes on a Lime scooter is, in many cases, by far the most convenient way to go meet up with your friends. Public transit agencies have many goals, but their top priority will always be to how best get their riders to their destination safely and conveniently. Private scooters have that goal too, as do Uber and Lyft, but it is an express afterthought to how best generate profit. That middleman of shareholders means that you as a customer are always secondary, a mere line in a spreadsheet.
Do you have any fear? Do you have a fear of getting hit by lightning?
You know, not really. I'm a pretty naively optimistic person, which is why I'm willing to be unemployed and a TikTok poster right now.
Is that, are you, okay, did you and Tanner both lose your jobs?
Yeah, so we were working at the same company, and we both got laid off at the same time. So we've just both been riding the wave to, you know, varying
Mazel
degrees of
tov, dude.
success.
Mazel tov.
No, the train is nearing the station. I got to figure something out quick, but
You will. I always found in my unemployments, because I've been a freelancer most of my life. Like I tried to do the serious thing. I got hired by a magazine that lasted all of 9 months, and then they let me go.
That's pretty good. You were brought to full term, I suppose. If you were a baby.
There's something there's a lot of woo-woo shit about money out there. Mm-hmm. And some of it I think I actually believe some of it. I do think that in my experiences, there have been times when it's about to hit zero, right? My bank account, I'm nearing zero, and then all of a sudden, boom, something happens, and it just flushes it back up.
Yeah, your ticket comes in.
Yeah,
maybe that'll happen.
Yeah, I think money is, like all things, energetic. Mm-hmm. Granted, I have parents who will never let me starve or sleep on the street unless I want to cosplay as like some crust punk.
Right. Well, so that, as is the case for most crust punks and oogles. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, respect, dude. I had a bad experience with crust punks, and this can kind of get into what we're talking about. When after I graduated college, I went and I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I was doing framing and demo for a construction company.
Okay,
and
cool.
I was doing demo for some pizza pseudo franchise, and I was just hauling drywall from this building to this truck, and in like one of the doorways was this crust punk couple, and they both had iPhones, and I didn't have an iPhone at this point. I still had a flip phone.
Sure. And
they were asking me for money while I was hauling drywood, and I was pissed. I was livid.
No, I've had my fair experience with we called them oogles. I don't know why, but just like growing up in Kansas City, that was in the punk scene there. That was always, you called the train kids oogles, who would roll into town and just ruin everybody's lives and show up drunk and just break shit. But that was always like, I kind of think of that as an economic indicator now. In Wicker Park in Chicago, which is kind of like, it used to be the hipster neighborhood in like the 90s. That's, it was known for being like the, countercultural mecca. That's where High Fidelity is set, with John Cusack, for example. And, so when I moved here, it still kind of had that veneer to it. Although now it's mostly just like expensive art galleries and Starbucks. But there's there's this intersection that people call Six Corners in Wicker Park, and every summer, it was like a weather vane or something out of an almanac where there were the first oogles of the season would just be planted with their fucking banjo and their like malnourished dog, and that's how you knew that like summer was here. But the past few summers I haven't seen them, and I'm not really sure what that foretells for like the American economy, but I don't think it's good. The oogle index is down.
Yeah, that's I can't believe that I missed them.
Yeah, right.
Like they were, I don't know, they colored. What the fuck?
Bless you. Well, there's been a lot of discussion about like how like what subcultures exist now and how they've kind of been in a way refined, like against this just like gaping maw of social media, and how Gen Z in particular is like their understanding of what it means to be part of a subculture is all online, and it's all it's immaterial. It's just stuff they experience through their phone. And I don't mean that necessarily as a critique, although I think obviously it's a bad thing. But to be a part of a subculture is to just like select a certain like Pinterest board of aesthetic pieces, right? Rather than like be attached to a group of people or whatever. And whenever I say this sort of thing, I sound like some kind of like Gen X loser with sour grapes who's like not getting with the times, and I guess I'm conscious of that. But it's also like part of me would think, just firing off the cuff here, that like there's probably a decline in crust punks because like what valence is there to doing that in today's world, right? Where you have a wealth of options as like a 16-year-old. Why would you choose to run away and hop trains when you could, be a DJ or something? And because there's just one source that everybody goes to for influence, online, because we're just increasingly atomized, and we live in a world where there's fewer like older brothers of friends to like give you cigarettes and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater or whatever. And so now all of this is happening online, and I just feel like, just the steamroller of monoculture rolls on.
Yeah, I think I remember being very hard on crust punks at the time, even though in 8th grade I was obsessed with Leftover Crack, Choking Victim. Did you ever listen to them?
Respect, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know what a crust punk was in 8th grade, but they seem to inform my politics even to this day. But yeah, nothing but respect now for crust punks, because at least even if they're cosplaying poverty, like at least they're physically embodying something.
Yeah, and like those were the people I first learned what like Food Not Bombs was and shit like that.
They have great politics.
Yeah, that's
great politics.
like anarchism, they can have it, but like there is a kind of respect, sort of the respect that like Al Pacino and De Niro have in Heat for one another. That's how I kind of view anarchists.
Wait, which one? Okay, which one is which though?
Well, that's the thing, because neither of us would want to be the cops, so I guess that's up for the lister to decide.
I mean, I guess like, the crust punk would be De Niro. Then that would have to be, I think, right?
Begrudgingly, I will accept that.
Yeah, but like, you have to be able to leave at any minute. Like right. that's crust punk mentality. Like just pick up your.
Like, the minute you get your girlfriend pregnant, you got to be ready to walk out that door. Catch the next train to Lafayette, Louisiana.
Yeah. So yeah, R.I.P. to crust punks. I guess that's a damn shame. But let's start things more formally here. Today
Sure.
on Coexist Inc., I have my dear friend Rick. Rick, do you want to do? Are you comfortable with your last name?
Not yet. I'm sure I will eventually, but we'll say Rick from clout.eater here at clout.eater on most of your social.
Rick from clout.eater. Yeah, I saw your last name pop up on Zoom. I won't say it. I don't know if I think you might have to change it for Hollywood.
Yeah, no, that's going to be trouble. There's still a sort of anti-German bias that exists today out there. I'm not going to say who's responsible for that, or who's kind of lingering resentment might be pulling strings out there. But see, that's the kind of joke that was the clout.eater days. I'm trying to do a rebrand here, and as you can see, it's not always going well.
No, I think it is really going well. I wanted to have Rick on the show. Largely because he has set out on a new creative endeavor, which is clout.eater.
Yeah.
You are making really great TikToks that focus on, I would say, they're urban critiques.
Downtown Denver and the agonizing screams that echo through the post-pandemic frontier cityscape. Part 1. We all know Denver as that city near the mountains that your boring single friend moved to during the pandemic in order to start mountain biking. And by mountain biking, I mean catfishing girls with armpit hair on Hinge. When I was deployed to the Mile High City to have a look around and investigate, first impressions were good.
Urban consumer critiques, and as someone who is more urban than country, I don't think anybody would be surprised by that. I really appreciate a lot of your insight. It's always fun. I mean, this is like the narcissist in everyone. When someone articulates something that you've felt deep down but haven't had the words for, largely just out of laziness, it feels really good to hear someone else say them. And so we'll do an early plug and not wait till the end of the episode because most people probably tune out by then, according to my analytics.
Sure.
But your TikTok account, which also is on your Instagram, is well worth a follow. I think you have incredibly insightful critiques of modern consumer urban society. So if you're interested in that, if you want to know why e-scooters you have that visceral disgust to them, Rick has perfectly articulated in my mind.
I appreciate you saying that. It's a lot of people push back on that, which I guess I understand because, I not to, butt in here, I guess, but what I think is interesting about, the place we're at today in terms of, the discourse such as it is there's a lot of, never before in, American society, I think, have as many people diagnosed that there's a problem in our culture, that there's something wrong, whereas I think anybody who has access to the news and whatnot can turn on the TV and see like, all right, yeah, things are fucked up, right? Where I think people run into difficulties, obviously, is whose solution is the best one and what is to be done generally. And I mentioned that with the scooters because a lot of people will hit back and say like, why be critical of the scooters? Like micromobility is a good thing. Like this is good urbanism. It's practical. It's great. But to me, the central point I made in the piece that I did, and I'm calling TikToks pieces now. That's how far I've fallen. But I think the phrase I used was the electric rent-a-scooter is the pale horseman of the post-pandemic societal apocalypse, comparing it to sort of the landlord's bucket of paint that just gets slathered over every fixture in the apartment you rent for an inflated amount. Because, it seems like there are so many instances today where solutions are being conjured up by people, in Silicon Valley or wherever who have no real interest in improving the lives of the people they're theoretically serving. And those solutions, may truly solve whatever problem is they're purporting to solve, but do so in a way that I think is antisocial, which is the argument to make about scooters, that they are antisocial in that, there's a difference between taking a bus for example, and hopping on a scooter and just kind of maintaining a distance between you and the world around you, which is, I think, what the scooters do. I think also the companies that just place these in the middle of cities just have no regard for how they do so, because part of it is they're racing for market share, but the other part is like, what do they care? It's just these are basically just little like video poker machines in a sense, where they just want people to sit there and insert credit into them. It doesn't matter where they go or how safely they arrive or what they do with the fucking thing, or its lithium batteries after they're done, but they just want that money back to arrive, to their wherever their remote offices, be it Austin, Texas, or Portland, or wherever the fuck. And I live in Chicago, which has a history of public transit that I think is a lot better than many cities in the country. Obviously, there's a lot to critique there as well. But what I've always said is, the difference between the CTA, which is the Chicago Transit Authority, is their goal will always be, how do we get our customers to their destination safely and effectively and, in theory, inexpensively. Now, you can criticize how well they do at that. Certainly people do. But any other solution that comes through the market will always contain the middleman of stakeholders. And so, therefore, your customer base will always be secondary to that the financial element of it. So the scooters will always have the goal of, how do we get people where they're going, as second to how do we make money. And to me, that's why I think it's just like such a revolting, premise in general. I compare the scooter to the air fryer in some ways. Now stay with me here, because the air fryer to me is like an equally kind of like it's this just device out of sync with the world around it, in terms of like the kitchen as we understand it, as this kind of harmonious balance of appliances, which again, if I'm being romantic about the fucking standard kitchen, like, I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily, but I feel like there's all these people who are like, oh, I don't want to like understand the world around me. How do I fucking get the microwave to change its power level? What does convection mean on my oven? I'm just going to slap this ugly fucking soft plastic device on my countertop and use it to heat up my shitty little Trader Joe's like fake kid cuisine meal for $20. And that's just how I'm going to choose to live my life, So this is the sort of thing I bring to the people of TikTok. This just charismatic lightning rod of an idea.
No, I appreciate it. And again, if people are on TikTok or Instagram, I'll put the link in all that bullshit, whatever. But the e-scooter thing hit me hard in particular. I think that's my favorite one you've done so far, because I've always viscerally, instinctively had a problem with e-scooters. Maybe because I don't use them, so I feel vindicated, because I'm like, no. And then someone vindicates me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It is nice when you receive that retroactive vindication of a choice you've already made. No. Nothing feels better.
I can't remember the last time I was wrong, dude. I mean,
I know. It's the damnest thing.
So, yeah, it is funny how there's a neoliberal... God, I hate that I just said the N-word. I'd rather say the other N-word sometimes. But I said the N-word. There is this sort of instinct or knee-jerk sort of... either you're being ableist or you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, blah, blah, blah. Like... I feel tricked oftentimes.
Mm-hmm.
You compare the e-scooter to the air fryer. I'll compare the e-scooter to like paper straws.
Sure.
Yes,
that's a good one too.
There's it just doesn't sit right with me.
Mm-hmm.
What I find really interesting is the absence of a social contract with the e-scooters, because what you see frequently, not only just with the actual users who leave them in very inappropriate places. If you want to talk about being like ableist, leaving your fucking e-scooter in the sidewalk.
Oh my God. Yeah.
and in the way of people, that's incredibly ableist. Or just inconsiderate. It's being a fucking dickhead. I don't want to call. I hate the word ableist. You're being a fucking asshole.
Well, the two of them happen to be existing at the same time, which makes it easier.
True. Yeah.
But it really, like the paper straw thing is a really good comparison, because I think it just gets to the root, which is market-based solutions, to me, will always be fundamentally flawed, in their rationale. The paper straw thing, especially because it's just, it revolves so much around signaling. I'll never forget the time I was back home in Kansas City, and which granted is not exactly the hotbed of progressive ideas that maybe elsewhere in the country is, but I got a iced coffee in a styrofoam cup with a paper straw. And I don't know what to tell you at that point. It's very silly.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very funny because I don't use a straw because I'm not gay. Like, if you're a straight man, I'm sorry, what are you doing using a straw?
Why are you as a straight man drinking out of a straw? No, that's true. That's a very good point.
I always felt like when people said, well, you have to provide straws because what about people who need them to drink. It's like, well, if you are in that position where you need a straw in order to consume things, wouldn't you just bring your own metal straw? Why do we have to? I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too is, and again, not to just like litigate Twitter battlegrounds, but like the ableist thing as like kind of cover for just throwing a wrench in the works of like the implementation of different progressive left-wing ideas will always be very frustrating, because there's always going to be that one person where it's like, well, what good is your meeting if people aren't wearing masks? Or I can't believe, why criticize Grubhub? Some of us can't go order at a restaurant. And to me, it just, I think there's something about social media that just obviously amplifies people's like urge to be heard in some way. And so therefore, if somebody sees something posted online, you are incentivized to be a part of the discussion on social media, be it for just clout or, the serotonin or whatever reason you have to be online. So you want to dive into that conversation and add your stupid idea to the top of the pile. And there's one surefire way to make sure that people don't treat that idea as stupid, and that's if they think you're, being mistreated or something like that. So, and it's a shame because there's, like we just mentioned with the scooters, there's a ton of legitimate reasons for people who aren't able-bodied to be pissed off in this country, but it's just sad to see those get co-opted in very silly ways, I think.
I also find the absence of a social contract with the scooters and just the e-bike situation or whatever is the glee with which people have when it comes to destroying those things.
You're
that
right.
seems to be the only like actual communal aspect of these e-rentals
really
is
heartwarming.
fucking them up. Yeah, I mean,
way.
I'm not like overly upset about these people who just decide to drive a scooter into the bay or whatever, even if it like probably is not great for the fishes. It's like, I get it, like because it's owned by no one, right? It's not the communities. It's not a community bike. The college I went to, Reed College.
Oh,
during
sure.
my period there, we
now
had this thing.
that's a very important puzzle piece that has now fallen into place. Okay.
You didn't know that? You didn't know
Got
how to read? We had this thing called the Reed Communist Shit Collective. And it was this organization that just provided stuff, like weird stuff for people to use at any and all times. And
I remember that, like when I was in high school reading about colleges, the Reed was the one that had a free pile. So I assume this is somewhat what you're referencing.
Yeah, that was a part of it. The Reed Communist Shit Collective, it was not serious. Like they didn't really talk about communism. It was more about just like having a fun time, which I'd say is not what most modern communists like to do.
No, probably not.
And I remember the induction ceremony was like an all-night bender, and you had to go to Humanities 101 lecture naked the following morning, and I regretfully did that. Fortunately, like the internet wasn't a big part of it. Anyway, one thing they did was they just had bikes everywhere. Like they were children's bikes. They were goofy. They weren't nice bikes. Yeah, and they were spray painted and tagged. Yeah, they were beaters, but they were littered all over campus, and they were just free for anyone to use at any moment you wanted to use them. And it was like, it was very cool. Like they're, and they weren't mistreated. People people put them in the bike rack, people put them away.
Sure. I mean, and that speaks to the problem with the e-scooters, is that there is just that intentional like compulsion to skip the line in terms of the social order. I think in the video I compared it to fast past your way through the Disney World line of society, and that it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if there's no social contract, then why would you respect this piece of property that is owned by somebody? It is owned by a private company that again has absolutely no roots in your community and no respect for you as just some yokel who they're trying to juice fare out of.
And I'd hate to disappoint all my Maoist friends that listen to this podcast. When I was in China, the e-bike craze was insane. And there's serious criticism of modern China. It is not communist. I'm a big China fan in general. However, there are certain interesting elements to it, especially when its capitalism bleeds through.
Right.
And for a period of time, I want to say this was in 2017, 2018, 2019. I was there when the e-bike craze went absolutely bonkers in China. And there were they flooded the streets with e-bikes. There must have been dozens of different companies that you could rent these bikes from. And I advocate anyone who's in a new city to bike through it.
Sure.
Like it's the best way to, I think, better than walking personally. I think biking through a city.
You can certainly cover more ground, yeah. You have to be like more aware. You can't be on your phone the whole time too. So
Exactly. That's the thing. I that's why I like to bike in general now, because like I drive on my phone. I hate to tell everybody.
it's-
I'm
brother.
looking at my fucking phone, dude.
I caught myself
Everybody is.
reading an article on the highway the other day, and I was like, okay, I gotta keep this a little in check. That's not good.
I started like paying my monthly bank statement on my phone while driving.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember to do it, whenever you see a certain exit,
if
that's what makes it
if I don't do this now, I'm gonna get a fucking fee.
Right. I think that's fair.
So in China, there were just these, and they would literally block off entire sidewalks. These mountains of bikes, and there was no social contract there. Total disrespect for it. So I think even in China, which I think has a stronger social contract, even though it doesn't compare to Japan's. Japan has like a real social contract with each other.
Sure. Yeah.
China, because like China is still trying to figure out what it is.
Well, I think there's a lot of historical and if you beg my pardon, material differences in the country's histories that might relate to the reasons why. I mean, that's a lot more people, a lot more land, a lot less.
They're also historically more rural at this point.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true. I think China's made a lot of leaps and bounds in a very quick time, and it seems like there a lot of that the quote unquote society is catching up. From what I understand. Granted, I've never been there. I mean, I take a similar tact with you on China, where it's like, I think China's good. Do I think they are the communist utopia that a lot of people seem to believe? No, but I also feel like that's a good dog to have in the fight in some ways, but also a lot of that stuff doesn't look fun. So who can say? I try not to make qualitative assessments in my work because for one thing, it makes you harder to pin down. So that's always nice, but also. I think for me, it's always been about like if you arrive to a certain conclusion, sometimes I think you could do so without saying whether or not something's good or bad. Now I know I just got done saying why I think the scooters are bad, but that said, I think in my work otherwise, like I had this whole Denver arc where I was critiquing a lot of things in Denver, and people. TikTok's very interesting because it gets very prescriptive on there. I think there's this idea that the person on the other end of the phone is looking for information of a certain digestible valence and wants to just synthesize that into their brain as quickly as possible so that they can like say they like learned something or acquired some new understanding. And for that reason, whenever people watch your content, they kind of expect you to be prescriptive about whatever it is you're talking about. So invariably, whatever subject I do a video about, there's somebody in the comment that's like, you're right, this thing sucks or whatever. And I understand that to a point because a lot of the maybe the like candor of the discussion I'm having is like kind of, I guess, snarky, I will admit to that, but I'm just always very surprised by the way people react to that sort of thing, because I try not to be qualitative or prescriptive necessarily and kind of let the argument speak for itself with, of course, varied results. This is all to say it's interesting the conclusions people arrive at online.
Yeah, there is a weird kind of optimism, which I think lends itself to positivity in America. I was just thinking about how I love that a lot of American superheroes are a consequence of some kind of like poisoning, and it worked out for them.
Oh, in a good way,
like,
yeah.
yeah, which is like, to me, is the most American idea in the world. It's like,
as opposed to like Godzilla, which is just has
exactly
like wrought havoc.
Exactly. I think the American is like, no, actually, like I got bit by a radioactive spider and it worked out for me. Like it's good. So I think in America, when you are critical of something, people love to be like, can't you just have someone have a good time? And it's just that pisses me off so fucking much.
Let people enjoy things.
Let people enjoy things. It's like, well, how do you know what to enjoy if you don't know what's bad?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
I think So the magazine that I got laid off from had a policy, when writing about food in particular, to never only review positively. So if something was bad, you just wouldn't write about it.
Yeah.
And what kind of like authority does that lend you? You know, what kind of credence do you have?
Yeah.
If you're not willing to be like, actually, this was shitty. This was not good.
See, that it's interesting thinking about, because at that point, then you have to sort of ask, what is your role? What is your role as that publication? Like, what are you trying to do? And
Make
I think
money.
historically the newspaper's role, or I'm sorry, you said it was a magazine, right? The magazine's role would be to like make an assessment of the things that people reading it would like to hear assessed. And then you're sort of being derelict in your duty by not doing that. But I think a lot of places now want to do the more like glitzy lifestyle tip of like, here's the cool stuff that everybody likes. And I will say in my videos, I do a lot of restaurant reviews in Chicago, and I don't do negative ones, kind of not as a rule, but just like, it's not as fun to do that. It's more fun to kind of like talk about why I think something's cool, opposite, again, the dredges of a morally bereft and bankrupt society, but that there's something good about the place I'm at inherently. And the other thing too is like, I don't want to speak for any influence that I may or may not have, because I don't really think it's there, but I don't really see the point in like tearing down another person who's trying to just make a living. I try to reserve most of my critique for the broad societal ill rather than individuals. I'm not a member of the cult of individual responsibility, is the way I kind of phrase it, where I don't believe in consumer activism in the paper straw vein, things like that. I think like when I did the Denver thing, I was all bent out of shape, worried that like this one guy who had served me a popsicle at the Arc'teryx store in this like kind of hip, like rich part of town. And I was like, God, that guy talked to us for like 10 minutes about our trip and was just super happy to be there. And I'm kind of like talking shit on his whole life. And he ended up commenting again after I mentioned that in the video. I was like, hey, all good, man. So maybe this guy was just, it's all roses for him. And I wish him nothing but the best. But I really think that even kind of the dumbest and most annoying people among us are also victims in a certain way to just the system we're all subjected to. So
that guy also didn't own the Arc'teryx store.
Yeah, that's a
He
good point. He's
didn't
fucking
design the
collecting
Arc'teryx stuff.
paychecks.
Yeah,
So what does he give a shit?
Just what does he fucking care?
Yeah.
So okay, let's talk about American cities here.
Sure.
Because so you're in Chicago, which my family is from.
Oh, I didn't know
My dad's
that.
side of the family is from. But I've only been there like 2 times,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't have much to say about that. But let's in the vein of positivity, let's talk about an American city that's doing it right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then we'll talk shit about some other cities afterwards. So, what's your do you have a favorite city in America?
Well, I it's interesting because if I had to pick a favorite city in America, I probably could, but it wouldn't really be because they're just so well run necessarily. I think I like cities because of sort of romantic notion of what things may have been or could be, or just vibes. I always tell people, for instance, and I don't know if I'd pick favorite necessarily, but like whenever people talk about Las Vegas, I always say I would never go to Las Vegas. I would much rather go to New Orleans, for instance, because I think New Orleans is one of the most unique cities in the United States, right? Very cool place. Obviously, it has a lot of fucking problems, and it's, I think, one of the most unequal cities in terms of income distribution in the U.S., which is saying something, and also is subject to the wretched lawmakers of the state of Louisiana. But like I'm really captured by the distinctions between different regions on Earth, because I get so caught up with like globalization and it's what I view as its like negative effects. And I always have to be careful when I say that, because people always assume you're like you mean that in like an Alex Jonesy way, which I don't. I'm not sympathetic to that necessarily, but I also feel like I think from a class perspective, it's not hard to identify the negative effects of globalization on people's lives.
Say global homo, please.
Yeah, sure.
Global
No,
homo.
none of that. But but like I feel a sense of loyalty to the city of Chicago. Like I mentioned, I'm not from here. I'm from Kansas City, but my father grew up in Chicago. So when I was a kid, we'd travel here to meet family and, over Christmas and things like that. So it was kind of the big city that I sort of grew up with that understanding of what that meant, and ended up moving here. And I think Chicago is unique because in a lot of ways of how far it's fallen relative to its importance on the world stage, like compared to like 100 years ago. Everywhere you go in Chicago, there's like buildings that used to be the largest on earth, or like these records that were set or broken or whatever that were eventually overtaken by elsewhere. And its heyday occurred at a point in American history when it felt like the script had not been set for the kind of country, the kind of society this place would be, and with all the hellish details that entails, right? And the jury was very much still out on like what it would mean to be America when superpower status was achieved. And now we see what that's done to us, and it's kind of horrific. But there's just like this lingering potential, like I almost want to say like epigenetic memory, if you will, of these big buildings and like labor history and what it means to be a member of society, and like transit, as I mentioned.
An accent. You got an accent.
Yeah, and there's that accent that's kind of going away at this point because every accent's going away. And of course, there's a horrific legacy of segregation and corruption and brutality, which is part and parcel with that. But to me, it's just there's so much hay bait about the Sun Belt and, no offense, Florida, as these places where the business of America is increasingly being occupied. And to me, like, fuck, I don't want to go to Chattanooga or whatever. I don't want to go to Austin, Texas. It just sounds, like that was the other thing about Denver too, is you go to Denver and everything, despite the Denverness of it all, is really interesting. Like, there really is this kind of Old West cowboy vibe to it. If you go to the outskirts, there's a lot of a kind of like frontier sensibility and history to it that I find very compelling. And when I travel, that's why I'm so fascinated in history, because the things that make cultures distinct from one another, I think it's just it makes for just a much more colorful tapestry of life, and the fact that there are so many, I think, again, market forces, if I had to ascribe blame, that want to like weigh down on that and connect everybody to everything and just sort of erode that distinctiveness, I think is kind of tragic in a way. And, for instance, I was reading the other day how Yingling, the beer, is going to be distributed in Illinois soon. And there was part of me that was like, I don't know, I kind of wish they wouldn't, because like what happens when everything's available everywhere all the time and there's no like, oh, we drove to Indiana for this epic Reddit beer that everybody likes. Like, obviously I don't give a shit about Yingling, drink whatever the hell you want, but just this idea that the corners are being rubbed down and softened, I find tragic. I don't know.
It is, and the absence of growing up in Florida, people would say, "Oh, there's no seasons here," which is not true. I mean, there are, like, people just, if you're familiar with a northern sort of like obvious season between winter and summer.
If Yankees don't see snow, they don't know what's going on.
Exactly. And one of the things that the seasons, I mean, right now it's raining, and it's the summer afternoon rains of Florida are incredibly nostalgic for me. But right now we're at like the end of mango season, and Florida, even though the mango isn't native, we have a very eccentric mango breeding culture here. The most weird mangoes come out of Florida, Southwest Florida.
Tell me more.
And my father has this one tree, this variety called the Carry, and it is like, it's liquid gold.
Okay.
I mean, when you eat it, like I make sounds when I eat it. I'm like, oh, it's so good. And what I love about it is that it can't be shipped because it's so soft that like it doesn't have a shelf life whatsoever.
Oh, yeah,
so it's like you got to eat it in its place. And I love that it's not available year round. It makes it better.
Yeah, absolutely.
When it's not ubiquitous.
Absolutely. And people who don't agree with that, there's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the world to me, and I don't know.
I remember when I had my first real strawberry when I was out in Oregon. It was like a wild little tiny strawberry, and I ate it, and I was like, "What the fuck is this? What have I been eating my whole life?"
Right.
Because those Driscoll strawberries that are just covered with fucking carcinogenic pesticides that don't quite cut it when you've had a real strawberry.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I think that there is the global homo.
Right.
I love how there is that like sort of like subtle homophobia in that word. It's not what
Subtle?
it means, but it's what it okay, good point. Yeah, the cities that provide like these unique experiences that you can't have elsewhere. Talk shit about Florida, please. I mean, I'll defend it.
Well,
especially because
I mean,
you know,
no.
It's worth. There's a lot to talk about.
No, I understand.
There's
Like,
a lot
I
of
think you
problems
do
here.
really good work in like kind of excavating that, and it's your take on it is very nuanced in a way that I think is valuable. I don't have any shit to talk on Florida as a state. I mean, it's gorgeous. It's one of the most unique in the country. Like, there are some TikTok guys that I like who they do a lot of like, I'm gonna make a meal for myself using only just things that I can go like either fish or catch or harvest, and you know, if it's like invasive iguana or lionfish, and then they do coconut. And I think that's really cool. I mean, I don't live in an area nearly as biodiverse, and there is something I think fascinating with that. I also think culturally in the backwater and stuff like that, in the Everglades, there's just so much really interesting shit about Florida. I mean, its role in the United States government and perhaps economy is something that I would have a critique for, but that has nothing to do with the state itself or the people who live there.
It is what is interesting about Florida, especially compared to like a frontier state like Denver, is that there is frontier left in Florida, which is why it's being subjected to the horrors of free market.
Right.
You know, we are. The reason why everybody's moving here is because it's the fraud capital of the country.
Right.
Now.
There's no like income tax or anything like that. Yeah.
Where once Chicago was full of fraud, and it created the culture out of it, in spite of it, and who knows what will happen here as a consequence. But yeah, like people come to Florida and ruin it with their memories from where they came.
Oh, sure.
It's the only time where I'm like anti-immigrant. Like I'm open borders when it comes to like the United States and all the refugees coming here. But I am anti-immigrant when it comes to people moving to Florida because these Northerners, these fucking Yankees, but it's mostly Midwesterners now.
Yeah, right. No, I'm sure there's a lot of like Chicago deep dish places in Florida now, and Portillo's or
Joey D's deep Chicago. I think I've had deep dish pizza in Chicago one time, and I was like,
sure
"Fuck, I'm never fucking with this again."
Yeah, right.
It was like whatever. I mean, it wasn't bad, but I don't seek it out. No, it is interesting when people come here with their memories, and it erases our memories.
Yeah, no, that's a very good way to put it. I mean, there is very much a premium placed on whose memories are more valuable and whose aren't, and that is again subject to the market, and that's tragic.
So, Chicago, great city.
Yes, it has its problems. I mean, I think it's also like, you know, I mentioned New Orleans earlier, and part of what I like about it is the romance of a city that is not only like figuratively decaying, but literally sinking into the earth. You know, like there's something just so Southern Gothic about that, frankly.
Right.
You walk through New Orleans, I don't know if you've ever been, but you'll come across whole sidewalks that are literally just submerged in water because it just the way the Mississippi River Delta functions is the path of the river changes over time, and so it's really not a good idea to have a city there permanently. But they didn't know that back 200 years ago or whatever. But and the culture of like Mardi Gras and voodoo and all the weird shit. It's and crawfish boils. Like I love the Cajun shit too. It's so interesting to me. I'm so compelled by that. I think that's another one of those things that is at risk of being diluted because of the way that people are capitalizing on globalism, and that again there's some kind of wistful sense of loss I feel about that. Although it's great that people get to experience that who have no chance of ever traveling, but I don't know, I can't help but feel there's something bad about it, I suppose.
Especially because what's replacing it doesn't feel exciting.
Right.
No,
of course.
Where,
just
where
market
to
tested
go
monoculture is horrific.
So we've spoken positively just to prove to people that we're not just negative Nancys.
Uh-huh.
Now let's talk some shit.
Okay.
What's your least favorite city? Do you have one?
Oh man, so I haven't been to every city in the country, obviously, so I can't really say. I will say I am exhausted hearing about Austin. I've never been, so I can't really say. L.A. I think could use taking down a peg or two. I don't know. I think everywhere's got its pluses and minuses, but Boston, I don't like the people. I kind of have a healthy respect for a kind of bombastic city that punches above its weight class, because Chicago in a lot of ways is like that. I think we're probably equally annoying, just in a more Midwestern sense. New York City, I have a begrudging respect for, but that's because, I don't get to live there. I like Chicago better, obviously, but whenever I'm in New York, I'm like, oh, damn, this is so cool. So yeah, that's kind of it, really. I don't know. St. Louis, but that's really more of a geographical rivalry thing. Like, I grew up in Kansas City, which was obviously on the other side of Missouri as St. Louis, and then I live in Chicago now, which is another sort of rivalry with St. Louis. So they've always been kind of in my crosshairs as a dump.
Yeah, I've been to a handful of American cities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always the question of like, well, where would I want to live?
Right.
And I can, when people ask me that question, like, because I talk about leaving Florida again, because things are not, things are bad here.
But it's getting ugly.
It's getting ugly, but like, where the fuck would I go? I don't know. But I guess every time I've lived in another city, and I'd say like Portland, Oregon was a place I spent 5 years in.
I've never been. It sounds cool though.
It's. I mean, again, it's like, okay, so Portland, Oregon, New York City are the cities I've lived in the longest outside of Florida, and there's always this aching feeling that I am just behind the times.
Right.
That I missed it.
Uh-huh.
Like now I'm just experiencing the dregs.
Sure.
Like everything is a ghost. And so it never feels quite whole. It never feels quite present to me.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Florida, coming back to Florida and just seeing all that's been lost since I was a child. I mean, it's changing so fast. I feel like I'm atoning for having ignored where I came from for so long. Because for so long, I just was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, you took it.
I gotta get the hell out of this place. Yeah, and so now I feel like I'm making up for lost time. But at the same time, it's like, damn, like I missed out on all of this. And so every city I've lived in, I've always felt like, yeah, it's I'm in it. I'm in the wake of it all. I'm not surfing the wave of this heyday in any particular culture.
The party's over.
It's all the party. My whole life has felt like the party's been over.
I think that's what's so. I'm very compelled by that, by picking at that feeling. Whenever I travel, like I always feel like there's like a kind of clock is ticking on experiences. You know, my girlfriend and I are going to France in October, which is the first time I'll ever go to France, and there's part of me that's like, oh, I got to check this off my list, because in 10 years, what might it look like? And, you say that and people assume that you're some weird right-wing Hulbeck reading sicko, which is not the case. I'm not anti-immigrant again. I think those people are just trying to make their way in the world, and I don't begrudge them that. But I think it's more, like, for example, I read online the other day that Wendy's is opening up in Ireland. And it's just like, well, I don't want Wendy's to be in Ireland. I want fucking whatever the weird Chinese food that they eat. Their Chinese takeout that's just deep fried fucking shit. I want it to be Irish, not Wendy's. And that's the distinction I try to make, because I'm not anti-immigrant. I'm anti-Wendy's, which I think is important to make clear.
I mean, Wendy's, she does have red hair, so she is Irish.
Oh fuck! I didn't even think of that.
She's coming home.
God
dude.
damn it! Ugh. Now I feel guilty. Okay, well, Irish American, and from what I understand, they don't really care for those over there. So it's another one of those guys from fucking Delaware who goes to Galway. It's like, oh yeah, we're probably related, but they love that. But yeah, I don't know. It's just between the marketized globalism is perhaps a better term than just globalism in general, because I think that perhaps rightfully conjures up a lot of unsavory connotations. Just the way that society seems to crumble, that adds to the sense of urgency as well. Is you want to go to places while they still can kind of sparkle, and rather when they're gutted out. Like, I would imagine seeing Detroit in the 80s or the 60s would be a lot different than seeing. I went there in probably 2014, and it's pretty rough. It was also very interesting and in its own way very real and compelling and unique. But it's just, we live in a time of such precarity that there's no telling what won't be available or what will or will not be available at any given moment. I think that a lot about, like, when it comes to the next generation, like how depressed I would be if I had a child in this world to an extent. And that's something that I used to want, like, just categorically is to raise a child in a family. But now I kind of question that urge, because it feels like if you are to bring a child into this earth, that means you are kind of co-signing the next 70 years of Earth's existence as something that would be a positive experience for your ostensibly loving child to grow up in. And I just don't know if you can make that deal. I don't know if you can sign that contract. I don't know what the next 70 years look like on this planet. There are times when it feels like it's objectively, kind of doomed. Which is, I know we said we're done being negative over here, but I don't know. That's just kind of where my mind goes
We're the negative chapter here.
But for that reason, it's like it makes me more appreciative of the things that still exist. Walking around Chicago is kind of like walking the halls of dead kings, because there's just all these former examples of, just the industry and the American century, which again, I obviously have critiques of and don't call a categorical good, but it's just, it's fascinating to see what has lingered and what hasn't. And I feel like it's very important to be appreciative of that, because it's not going to be around forever.
Yeah, I think to touch on the fear of change, especially with like the influx of new arrivals, I too am bring up. I do not have a scarcity mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's more than enough for everybody in the world many times over. Being in Florida, I get the idea of these foreigners
mm-hmm.
coming in here and just fucking our shit up.
Well, yeah,
man.
like if every fucking retired couple from Iowa wants a beachfront Fort Myers condo, then yeah, that'll be a problem eventually.
Yeah, well, now it's all the interior of the state. Everybody's fucking going out, and they're the culture now in Florida with all these people, this influx of people who think they're getting cheap property, but they are not. They're sorely mistaken right now. We're gonna have a mass exodus in Florida, and that's gonna be incredibly interesting.
I'd like to hear more about that. That does sound interesting.
But we have right now, the people who are coming here, the promise of cheap land, because you can get better square footage than you can, I think, in like other areas.
Mm-hmm.
No income tax. Again, that's
right.
something that people seem to really like. But they like to have these like ranchettes,
Yeah.
the thing that's so upsetting in Florida here is it is gorgeous. I mean, like we have people don't really know what Florida looks like because they don't. It's not their fault they weren't shown it.
Right.
Florida has the largest system of freshwater springs in the fucking world.
Oh wow, interesting.
Like, our springs are glorious,
That's pretty
and they're being destroyed. they're not going to last much longer. So enjoy it while you can. But
what are they just bulldozing them for duplexes? Is it just that?
It's not that they're bulldozing them. It's that they're taking too much water out of the aquifer.
That makes more sense. You probably wouldn't want to build a house on a spring.
Well, the Mormons are the largest private landowners in the state of Florida.
No kidding. The Mormon Church.
Yeah,
Huh.
The Mormon Church. Deseret
I didn't know they even
Ranch.
went there.
They've been here since the 50s, I think. Cheap land.
I guess that's
were
true.
Smart.
They're very opportunistic in that way. Like they were in Mexico and all that weird shit.
So they bought I think it was 330,000 acres just south of the St. Johns River.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, they kept it as ranch. But now they have these plans to build, I think, something like 500,000 homes, which just the math doesn't work out. The problem is people are worried about sea level rise.
Mm-hmm.
But what you should really worry about is actually drought in the center of Florida.
Sure.
We don't get as much rain as we used to. We've blocked off. Like Florida should be a giant sheet of water that just like moves to the south, and we've blocked it off.
Because I believe it's the flattest state in the U.S. or something because it's so low at sea level.
But we're running out of water in the middle of the state. And so these aquifers that create the springs, because the rain pours, it's all limestone porous, goes through, lifts the aquifers push up, and you have just crystal clear blue water. It's really something else to behold. So when you come and visit, I'll definitely take you.
No, I'd love to. I'm really due for, like, it's a shame because we're going to Key West actually in November for a wedding, but we don't have any time to.
That's disappearing. So go to Key West.
That's another thing too.
That's going away.
Like,
that's going away.
Fuck. Like I went down that kind of existential like hellhole myself when I was thinking about that, because I remember going to Key West as a kid when it really was like, and not really was, but I'm sure more so the kind of like little, not undiscovered, but like lesser known pocket of where people could go to just kind of like disappear and live this kind of hippie lifestyle.
Hard to get to.
Right.
It's hard
yeah.
to get to.
And now, as I understand it, all the fucking cruise ships stop there, and there's just Airbnbs.
They
and all that
voted.
shit.
They voted. The local jurisdiction, or the local county, voted in Key West to stop cruise ships from coming.
It's a good idea.
Ron DeSantis, our great governor, said, "No, fuck you. They're coming."
That's insane.
It's crazy.
But no,
it's crazy here.
To your water point, that just brings me to another reason that I'm kind of bullish on Chicago, or bearish. I can never remember which one's the good one. But I think
Bull, I think.
Well, okay, then I had it right the first time. I like that. But I think, people make a lot of hay about the potential balkanization of the United States, which, I'm kind of in the camp of, why would anything happen? We live in a country, in a world where nothing ever happens. But if that were to happen, I would think I'll give you my pitch here, because that Chicago would be maybe an advantageous place to be in. Now, during the last election cycle, when dearly departed Mayor Lori Lightfoot was kicked out of office, there was another candidate named Paul Vallis, and he was a Democrat, because in Chicago you basically have to run as a Democrat even if you're not. But he was famous for, among other things, like reinventing the public school system in New Orleans after Katrina, which, if you've read Shock Doctrine, was not exactly a very successful endeavor, depending on who you talk to. And he wanted to run for mayor in Chicago, and gave this crazy press conference, or I don't know, it was sort of like a conversation he had with some business leaders or something. And somebody asked him, what is your favorite thing about Chicago? Which, to a normal person, is a very easy layup of a question. You say, the Bears, the deep dish, the Cubs,
Bears.
Whatever. Fucking, there's a million things that, like, old guys just start clapping like seals whenever they hear, the Old Town, Second City, old style, like all this shit. And he said his favorite thing about Chicago was that, and I quote, "We are the Saudi Arabia of fresh water," which is an insane thing to say, but it's also not wrong. But what he meant was he wanted to privatize it, right? And kind of sell off the water rights to the highest bidder for the coming, drought apocalypse that you described, and build pipelines, I assume, to Arizona, to Florida, to what have you, and just let these investors kind of carry their money home in a wheelbarrow. But if I am in my most optimistic utopian mindset, I do believe in the future of the Chicago Hydro Soviet, where we can nationalize the water, use that lake, and really just kind of start churning if the balkanization should take hold, and we really do need to make a go of it on our own. So I'll tell you now, get in while the getting's good, folks. Sell your condo in Fort Myers. Come on and join us. Get yourself a hot dog.
That's a legitimate pitch, and it's something that when I talk to my mother about like the future, I tell her it ain't here.
No.
it ain't here. We aren't real Florida crackers. I don't know how to make swamp cabbage, which is a boiled cabbage palm stew.
Oh, interesting.
It doesn't taste great, but it's interesting. Yeah, no, I think that there's gonna be a funny sort of refracting or reflexiveness of these people from the Midwest coming down to Florida bouncing back to the Midwest when they realize it ain't viable.
Yeah,
here.
it's like volunteering for the purge almost, you know? Like, obviously, you're many decades early, but it's like, yeah, well, you know, we're empty nesters. Our kids went to Bard College and don't call us anymore. What should we do? Oh, let's move to Florida and then eventually have to chainsaw each other for gallons of water.
I mean, it's going to be way dark. It's not going to be as sexy as that. I think that we are going to have in Florida, because it's so spread out and because it's so dependent on cars.
Right.
There isn't a pedestrian culture here. That in my vision of an apocalypse in Florida is of just people fucking rotting to death in their non-air conditioned homes when their power grids fail.
Every year that happens more and more already. So, you know, there's always some horrific story of some poor woman in Baltimore or
hot.
Phoenix.
It's so hot, dude. And so, yeah, I think because our age in the state of Florida is so high, there isn't the will to fight. I mean, I think you'll have like, I did see this funny video of this old guy in a condo or something, like limping over to some guy who's filming outside of his door, and he's obviously like had a stroke because of the way he speaks, and he pulls out a fucking little handgun from his loose sweater pants. I was like, oh my god, dude, what the fuck?
That is the Lime Scooter mindset. Genuinely, to think you can wear sweatpants but also wield a handgun. It is having it of both ways that we have been engendered to believe is possible in this country.
Oh, man.
That's what it is. That man is the paper straw in the styrofoam cup. And they're in charge now. It's their country.
Oh man, it is. It's bleak. It's definitely bleak.
It's so funny that, you know, I'm sure you're familiar with the concept, like the Brazilianification of the world. If not, it was like kind of this, I forget the guy's name. He's a German guy, like Uter Beck, but Uter's a name in The Simpsons, so I don't know. But it was a concept in the 90s, basically saying, you know, that as modernity progresses and the market begins to dictate more of what happens, our society will start to resemble more of what's happening in Brazil, right? Which is the extreme degrees of inequality, the kind of unresolved tension of former slave owners and just the landed gentry. You know,
but fucking great music, though.
Well, sure, that's the thing.
Is that they exchanged really good music?
So we have that to look forward to. And it's just so fascinating to feel like, oh, sometimes we've kind of like skipped over that, and we don't even need to call it the Brazilianification. We can just call it the Floridization of American society in a lot of ways.
I have been saying for a minute now, I didn't expect this to be the Florida show, but
I'm sorry, it's Florida all the way down.
You know, we are the Wang, you know, we are the Wang of the United States. No, the future does feel like Florida in a lot of ways, and people can learn from our mistakes. You know, I think people who are afraid of Project 2025 need only to look to Ron DeSantis's desantification of the state of Florida, which implements like a lot of Project 2025's mentality, which is basically just steamrolling over any sort of legal barriers that once existed.
Yeah.
And it's falling to pieces in front of our face. I mean, like, depending on what kind of hurricane hits us this summer, which it's gonna fucking happen.
No, I mean,
we're gonna
about the shit
gonna
in Houston.
get a big one.
Doesn't look good. It sounds like it's getting worse.
No, that was a Cat 1. That was a Cat 1. We're gonna have. It's topped off at Cat 5 right now. Expect Cat 6, Cat 7 to start to appear in the meteorological lexicon.
Hey, we don't have those in the Windy City, baby. It doesn't get that windy.
Yeah, that was the funny thing about Chicago is my sister went to DePaul.
Oh, that's where I went. Cool.
Oh, cool. You guys should link up.
Yeah, well, at the next alumnus meeting, I'm sure we'll get coffee.
My grandma got kicked out of DePaul
for
being pregnant. So
we like to keep it in the family and at the crib.
Yeah. But I remember being there in
so did
October.
I'm sorry, but so did Norm Finkelstein. That's the other thing.
That's
where he was denied tenure because of the Dershowitz lawsuit.
Okay.
It's a little tidbit.
Yeah, my Jewish grandmother, Norm Finkelstein, they probably would have gotten along really well, actually. But I remember being up there and being like, why the fuck would anyone live in Chicago? Like, Jesus Christ, the wind. Oh.
Well, you know, I tell you what, you guys are getting Cat 6, Cat 7. Winter's only getting easier up here. That's the other thing. And that's a shame.
Wow.
Like,
Good
I don't
point.
consider
Yeah,
that
yeah.
a bonus because again, just go back to the romantic visions of the differences in cultures and the seasons.
You should freeze to death in Chicago if you get locked out of your apartment. That's the romantic part, right?
Well, yeah, sure. We can't get rid of that. But I don't know. There's something to me very distinct. I mean, there's a lot of hay made about the Chicago winters. I think by Chicagoans who like to kind of puff up their chest. I don't really think they're that bad. I mean, shit, you get just as much snow in Boston or New York, maybe more. But I just, I think to me, if I lose snow, I'll kill myself. I love the snow. I think it's amazing. It's beautiful. It makes things cozy.
Listen,
nice.
we'll come up with some kind of technocratic solution for that.
I'm sure so there can be some sort of like
here
app
in Florida.
where you can rent a like snow machine to kind of blow over your house and not your neighbor's house. I think that'll start coming.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're experimenting with that in Dubai somewhere.
In Celebration, Florida, which is the Disney-owned subdivision in Orlando, they have a snow machine on Christmas to create snow in Florida.
And that's the thing, right? Is it will be Disney that is responsible for the maintenance of society. Like I always go back to this and just it blows my mind how when the Don't Say Gay bill was in the news and that battleground was being fought on in Florida, it was you had the right wing champion of Ron DeSantis, a arguably effective politician. To what extent, I suppose you could debate, but a guy who had his plan and was seeking to execute it sort of in a surgical method. And on the left-wing side, who was defending liberal values, who was the champion of progressive ideals? Fucking Disney. The most evil fucking, the happiness cartel. And people just were fine with that.
I remember I wrote about that for my now defunct blog, Apocalypse Florida.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. I deleted the article too because I
did you get an
may
email
or may
from the
not
lawyers?
have
Did the goon show up at your house?
Not yet. I may or may not have a story coming out with National Geographic. That's
I see.
Getting more and more tenuous. But yeah, the freelance contract you sign with a mouse, you almost have to promise that you will not insult Disney in perpetuity.
Well, I take back
but yeah,
everything I said.
this is you, and actually, this is Rick talking right now.
Yes, exactly.
I wrote a story. They don't know. They don't know. I wrote a story about. I called it Spook versus Spook, or Spy versus Spy, and it was about how DeSantis, who is, I think a CIA asset.
Yes.
Or at
No,
least
I remember. I
from
read
it.
this one actually. I thought it was very good.
Yeah. And Disney being formed, William Casey, blah blah blah, Wildville. I found it immensely frustrating that Disney was saving the day.
Yeah.
So annoying.
I mean, it's just that's where we're at. That's the future, right? Like I remember, there's a author's name is Alex Hockey, I think, and he wrote a piece for American Affairs about Brazilianification, which is kind of why I was looking over it recently, and it's kind of fresh in my memory. But he has this line basically saying that in the 20th century there was a willingness for states and governments effectively to I think he said determine social outcomes because of all the uncertainty surrounding the Cold War and like emerging economies. Like there was a lot more up for grabs with like the Russian penumbra, as Claire Booth Luce put it. I've always liked that quote. There was this like understanding that in order to script a future that we wanted to live in, there would necessarily be like state intervention. But now if we're living in the Fukuyama end of history, then there's no need for that state intervention anymore. And just the opposite, the hand can release and let the tension just spin and let the market take over, which is what we're seeing now in just basically all aspects of life, like right down to the presidential election, where it's a vote between somebody who is actively hostile to this American state and another person who is literally asleep at the wheel. But that's by design. That's what we want. It's very tragic, and I hate getting all doom pilled on it, but like it's just kind of where we're at. I don't know.
Yeah, it is funny that these presidential elections feel like some kind of consumer choice between two different franchises that I don't really.
No,
wanna
right,
eat
yeah.
at Chili's or Applebee's.
Two people who will take us to the same destination, but will just simply arrive at different speeds.
So both people are gonna give me diarrhea. One is just gonna be hotter than the other, I guess.
Exactly.
You know,
No, that's precise.
Yeah,
like
that's what it feels
we
like.
can't even conceive of an analogy about the presidential election without fucking Wendy's. It's got to be burger.
It's gotta be burger.
It's chili.
All right, I think that's
chili with a finger in it. All kinds of that.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it because I thought we'd get into Biden. I'm kind of glad we didn't. But again, Rick, keep doing what you're doing, man. I think it's gonna pan out.
I appreciate it. I hope so.
I know you're not monetizing it yet.
I got 300
but
followers
again,
until I get that set up.
yeah.
Counting it down.
So please, if you aren't already, follow Rick. Rick, give him the ats that they should follow
I
you
am
at.
at clout.eater on TikTok. I think Instagram too. I got a YouTube channel. There's only a few things up on there. YouTube's a lot more work, so that's coming slower. But
yeah, YouTube's annoying.
oh, it's a pain in the ass. But that's all going to be there. It's all, you know, any one of those will have directions on how to get to the other two. So appreciate it.
Yeah, I think what we should do in the future is when I think really fun for us to at some point both go to the same city together.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And and focus it on like a single city.
I'd love if things go according to plan, then I'll be traveling a lot more. I mean, not that I already travel a fair amount anyway, but I want to be able to make money doing it. So
we'll link up, and I think if we start doing focused city by city analyses,
yeah, that would be cool.
be really
I'd love to
cool.
experience Isaac's Florida at some point.
I'd love to have you
Yeah,
here. You're
that would
more
be
than
cool.
welcome to come.
So,
So
hopefully.
we'll arrange that, and keep posting, dude.
You never stop posting.
All right.
If you listen to do you edit these or you just put them out?
I edit them.
If the part about the last name and my flat anti-Semitic joke about Hollywood doesn't land, you just cut that.
I'm gonna leave this in here right now so that people know that it's cool. Hey, you got a shield right here. I'm your Jewish shield.
Well, that was the
brother.
thing
You're
is,
all
over
good.
camera, I could see you kind of smirk, but there was just dead air. And I was like, fuck.
I'll put in a Seinfeld laugh track.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yes, exactly.
All right, man. I'll see you.
Yeah, let's do
on
this
the
again,
internet.
buddy. Thanks a lot.
The function of that police action, those interventions in Central America and the Middle East, the function is system sustaining. It is to maintain that overall system. And you don't look at the particular cost. I could demonstrate to you that every single bank robbery, that in every single case practically, the cost of the police was more than the actual money that the robbers took from the bank. Does that mean, oh, you see, there's really no economic interest involved then? They're not protecting the banks. The police are just doing this because they're on a power trip, or they're macho, or they're control freaks. That's why they do it. No, of course it's an economic. Of course they're defending the banks. Of course, because if they didn't stop that bank robbery, regardless of the cost, this could jeopardize the entire banking system. You see, there are people who believe that the function of the police is to fight crime, and that's not true. The function of the police is social control and protection of property.